I like the phrase lead with love. Truth comes second in those, a lot of times in these tense conversations. So you lead with love. You can't tell the truth to somebody who, one, doesn't want it and who doesn't trust you because you haven't built up the relational credibility to do it. And so you want to lead with love. There are people who it's just not going to do any good to have the conversation with because they don't want to have the conversation. All they're going to do is get angry and they want to argue. And Paul tells Timothy, the Lord's bondservant must not be quarrelsome, right? So if we're going to get into an argument, what's the point? Not only that, I think a person's walk with Jesus is way more important than their political things and their political ideas, because their walk with Jesus will ultimately shape that. So if they're not walking with Jesus and they don't know Jesus, then let's emphasize that and focus that rather than argue about our political convictions. My daughter-in-law has a friend that she's known since she was in elementary school who was like the last person that she would have ever thought would have become a follower of Jesus. He was as progressive and liberal and far left as you could possibly imagine. Somehow, in the grace of God, she became a follower of Jesus, and guess what? Some of her political convictions began to shift back the other direction as she began to read the scriptures and think about Jesus. Her thinking about what's good for the country and what's good politically and what's good for society began to change. So I would rather have conversations about people's discipleship to Jesus than their politics. Now, if they're a follower of Jesus and we have some differences of opinions, then let's approach them under the banner of our discipleship to Jesus. And can we just have a cordial conversation? For me, that means listening more than telling. I ask lots of questions. You ask lots of questions, people do a lot of self-diagnosing and self-reflection if we're able to have a good conversation. And they might realize, yeah, that doesn't totally make sense, right? So that's I think we're all gonna have to find our own way. But for me, that works for me, to ask lots of questions, to get people thinking, because if you get them thinking, they just might change, right? So rather than telling, I practice asking, and then try to focus on primarily the core things that really matter, ultimately their relationship with Jesus.